In a remote part of the galaxy, far from the peaceful civilizations that had long grown accustomed to their own dominance, there existed a once great empire known as the Zaxxari. The Caxari had lived for millennia, thriving on their advanced technology and intellectual achievements. Yet beneath their carefully constructed society, they kept a terrifying secret. Long ago, when they were just a fledgling race in the cosmos, they had been subjugated by an even more ancient power, the humans. But the humans were not like the peaceful creatures that Caxari had become. No, humans had once been warriors, masters of destruction, capable of reshaping the very fabric of space and time. They were the sleeping war gods, a name whispered with both awe and fear across the galaxy. These humans had been the rulers of the stars, their strength unmatched, their abilities beyond comprehension. But their might had been too great, too dangerous for the galaxy to bear. So the Zaxxari, in their desperate need for survival, had sealed them away, deep within the forgotten corners of the universe. For thousands of years, the war gods remained dormant, their power suppressed, their potential locked behind layers of stasis. But now the silence was broken. The Zaxxari's advanced sensors, constantly scanning the stars for any sign of danger, suddenly detected a disturbance. At first, it was barely a flicker, a strange, unexplainable energy surge emanating from a distant and long-forgotten world, Earth. It was a place that Zaxxari had long dismissed as unimportant, a planet teeming with primitive life forms that had no real significance in the grand scheme of the universe. Yet, this signal, this disturbance, was impossible to ignore. It pulsed with an ancient power, one that the Zaxxari had once feared and never wished to see again. The sleeping war gods were awakening. Panic spread among the Zaxxari leadership as they realized what was happening. The very thing they had spent millennia trying to prevent was now coming to pass. The humans, once thought to be mere myths, were stirring from their deep slumber. The ancient warriors, with their unparalleled abilities and devastating strength, were returning. The Zaxxari immediately began preparations for the worst. They feared that once these war gods fully awakened, their planet, their entire civilization, would be at risk. They could not afford to allow the humans to regain their former power. Back on Earth, life continued as usual, unaware of the cosmic forces that were beginning to move. However, strange things started happening. It began with small incidents, dreams that felt too real, as if they were memories rather than fleeting images. Some humans, seemingly ordinary people, began to experience visions of distant worlds and epic battles. They saw themselves not as they were now, but as mighty warriors, leading armies across galaxies. Others heard voices in their heads, whispers of ancient words, calling them to awaken, to remember their true power. It wasn't long before these odd occurrences began to spread. People from all corners of the Earth began to gather, sharing their dreams and experiences. As they did, an undeniable sense of connection grew among them. They could feel something stirring within themselves, something long dormant but undeniable. Among these awakened individuals was Maya, a scientist with no memory of ever being anything more than human. But as the dreams grew stronger, so did the strange abilities she began to notice. Her senses became sharper, her reflexes faster, and her mind clearer than ever before. She wasn't the only one. Others began to experience similar transformations. Some could move with such speed that it seemed they could bend time itself. Others displayed strength that defied explanation, capable of lifting massive objects with ease. And others still found themselves developing a connection to weapons, as if they had been born to wield them. It was as if they were rediscovering skills and talents from another life, a life of warfare and conquest, a life that had been forgotten for too long. As the days passed, it became increasingly clear that these humans were not ordinary. They were the war gods of legend, their powers awakening once again. But the question remained, what had caused them to sleep for so long? And what dangers now lay ahead? Little did they know that the Zaxxari, in their fear and desperation, were already preparing to take action. The galaxy was on the brink of a new conflict, one that would determine the fate of not just Earth, but the entire universe. And as the war gods began to awaken, the Caxari could only brace themselves for the storm that was coming. The door to a new era had been kicked open, and humanity's legacy was about to be rewritten in ways no one could have ever predicted. The Caxari, sensing that the war gods were stirring once again, realized they could no longer sit idly by. Their worst fear was unfolding right before their eyes, and the ancient powers of Earth, of humanity, were beginning to awaken. Knowing the potential devastation that could follow, they decided to act swiftly. Using their unparalleled technology, they initiated an aggressive maneuver to suppress Earth's rising power before it could fully manifest. Without warning, massive ships, dark and foreboding, appeared in the skies above major cities around the globe, descending like monstrous shadows. The Caxari had come, their weapons poised for destruction, their mission clear: to crush the war gods before they could awaken completely. But what the Caxari hadn't expected was that humanity was far from defenseless. Earth's people, long thought to be insignificant by the rest of the galaxy, began to rise up in a way that was nothing short of extraordinary. When the Caxari forces attacked a major city, the humans didn't panic. Instead, they fought back with a ferocity and coordination that bewildered the invaders. In the heart of the city, Maya, an ordinary scientist with no prior combat experience, stood in the midst of the chaos, her mind still struggling to comprehend what was happening. But as the battle raged around her, something inside her began to stir. A deep hidden power, buried in her very DNA, began to awaken. In an instant, Maya's body moved faster than she could process, her senses sharpening as if the world around her had slowed to a crawl. With no time to think, she instinctively reached for a weapon nearby, a simple object, a metal rod, and with a powerful swing, she struck down one of the Caxari soldiers. Her movements were fluid, precise, almost as though she had been born to fight. The Caxari, shocked by her sudden strength and speed, quickly realized they were up against something they had never anticipated. Maya, unknowingly tapping into the power of the ancient war gods, dispatched the invaders with a skill that rivaled even the finest of Caxari warriors. As the Caxari forces were repelled from the city, it became undeniable: the war gods were real. They had been dormant for eons, but the door to their ancient power had now been kicked open. Maya wasn't the only one affected. Across the globe, people were experiencing similar transformations, some stronger, some faster, others with heightened senses. It was as if humanity's dormant potential was beginning to rise, one person at a time. Ordinary men and women, many of them without any prior military training, were unlocking abilities that made them formidable against the alien invaders. However, the awakening was not without its challenges. Despite their newfound strength, the humans were not yet united. Maya saw this for herself as she tried to rally the awakened individuals to act together. But the fear of the unknown and the shock of their sudden powers held many back. The Caxari, though stunned by their initial defeat, quickly regrouped. Their forces were vast, and their technology was far superior. They had underestimated humanity once, but they would not make that mistake again. The first battle had been won, but the war had only just begun. As Maya struggled to bring together the scattered forces of Earth, she knew that time was running out. The Caxari had already begun deploying more advanced weapons and tactics. The war gods were awake, but were they ready to fight as one? Could humanity come together in time to face the coming storm, or would the Caxari's relentless assault tear them apart before they could fully harness their potential? Maya's heart raced with uncertainty, but one thing was clear: Earth was no longer the helpless planet the Caxari had once believed it to be. The war gods had returned, and they would not be easily stopped. The battle for Earth had only just begun, and Maya felt a growing sense of responsibility. She was no longer just a scientist. She was one of the first to awaken, and perhaps one of the leaders who would unite humanity's scattered warriors. But the Caxari weren't waiting. As Earth's warriors began to awaken, the true test of humanity's strength loomed ever closer. Would the humans be able to overcome their fear and unite in time to protect their world? Or would they fall to the overwhelming might of an alien force that had already once defeated them? The future of Earth and the entire galaxy was now in their hands. As the days passed, Maya, now emerging as one of the key leaders among the newly awakened humans, began to feel the weight of her newfound responsibility. The battle against the Taxari was far from over, and humanity's survival depended not only on their strength, but on understanding the true origins of their power. What were these abilities they were unlocking? Maya knew the answers lay hidden somewhere deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a place lost to history and untouched by time. Driven by an unshakable sense of purpose, Maya led a group of the awakened to an ancient temple hidden far beneath the planet's crust. This temple, she had learned from old records, was not just a ruin, but a relic from a forgotten age, an era when humanity was far more than simple Earth-dwellers. As they descended into the depths of the Earth, the air grew thick with anticipation, and the silence of the ancient place seemed to echo the weight of centuries. The walls of the temple were etched with symbols and carvings, each telling stories of long-gone times. It was as if this place had been sealed away, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. And now that someone was Maya. At the heart of the temple, they found what they had been searching for, a set of holographic records preserved in a chamber untouched by time. Maya activated the device, and the room came alive with shimmering light. The holograms flickered to life, revealing images of a civilization that was both magnificent and terrifying. These were the humans of the past, humans who had once ruled not just Earth but entire galaxies. They were the war gods, a race of warriors who had conquered the stars with a power so vast and destructive that it seemed as if they could reshape reality itself. The records told a story of a vast empire that spanned the cosmos, where humanity was revered and feared. These ancient humans could alter the very fabric of space and time, bending it to their will. They had the power to wield weapons capable of disintegrating entire planets, and they commanded fleets of ships that could traverse the stars in the blink of an eye. They were more than just conquerors, they were gods, with abilities that no other species could comprehend. But with great power came great danger. As Maya watched the holographic records, the story began to take a dark turn. The Empire had not fallen to external enemies, but from within. A rebellion had risen among their own ranks, a group of powerful individuals who feared the unchecked might of the war gods. The records revealed how this rebellion led to the Empire's collapse, as the war gods' power became too much to control. Fearing that the galaxy could not survive if these warriors were allowed to remain free, a coalition of alien races, including the Caxari, had joined forces to imprison them. The war gods were placed in stasis, hidden away on Earth, their powers sealed to prevent them from ever threatening the galaxy again. The revelation sent a chill down Maya's spine. The very beings she and others had become were once the rulers of the stars, the ones who had shaped the galaxy according to their will. The power coursing through her veins was not just a gift, it was a legacy of destruction, a force that could bend the universe to its whims. The question now became, could humanity control this power, or would they too fall prey to the same fate as their ancestors? The Caxari, Maya realized, had known all along that the war gods would one day awaken. They had feared this day for millennia, and that fear had shaped their every action. Now that the war gods were stirring once again, the question of control became more urgent. Could humans, now awakening to their ancient powers, rise above the destructive urges of their ancestors? Or would they, like those before them, lose themselves to their own strength and bring about the end of the galaxy they once sought to rule? Maya stared at the holograms, the weight of the discovery settling heavily on her shoulders. The war against the Caxari had only been the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead. Could humanity overcome its own legacy and wield its power for the good of the galaxy? Or would the war gods become destroyers once again, as they had so many centuries ago? The future of not just Earth, but the entire universe, now depended on the choices of those who had once ruled it all, and the door to that power had already been kicked open. The battle for Earth had begun in earnest, and the Taxari soon realized that humanity's resurgence was not just a temporary flash of resistance, it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The awakened humans, led by Maya and other newly awakened individuals, had quickly learned to harness their dormant powers. What was once a chaotic defense had now become a well-organized force. Armed with ancient technology, far superior to anything Earth had ever developed, they'd formed the first coordinated human army. This was no longer a ragtag group of survivors fighting back in desperation. These humans were warriors, and their return was an unstoppable force. The Taxari, having once dominated the galaxy, found themselves facing an enemy they could neither understand nor defeat with their conventional tactics. Each of these new warriors was a force to be reckoned with. Not only did they possess superhuman strength, but their minds were sharper, their reflexes faster, and their strategic prowess unparalleled. As the first true human army began to form, Maya stood at the forefront, guiding them with a mix of wisdom and battle-hardened instincts that came from something far older than her own memory. The warriors under her command weren't just humans. They were the war gods, born from an ancient legacy, their potential finally unlocked. They fought with a brutal, coordinated precision that was unfamiliar to the Taxari, who had always relied on their advanced technology to dominate. But no amount of alien weaponry could match the raw power of the awakened humans. The first truly significant battle took place on the outskirts of Earth's atmosphere, where Maya commanded a fleet of human warships, ships powered by technology that predated even the most advanced Taxari inventions. These ships moved with an eerie grace and deadly intent, their weapons disintegrating Taxari vessels with a force that made the invaders' attempts to retaliate seem laughable. The warships, once forgotten relics of Earth's distant past, now carried the might of humanity's forgotten empire, their energy shields glowing brightly as they tore through the Taxari forces. The once invincible fleets of the Taxari were now no match for the ancient power that surged through the human warships. Each shot fired was calculated, each move on the battlefield executed with precision, as if the humans knew exactly what the Taxari were going to do before they did it. The Taxari, stunned and desperate, tried everything to regain the upper hand. They unleashed wave after wave of devastating attacks, but their efforts were futile. The war gods had returned, and with them came a wrath unlike anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. It was clear to the Taxari. They were outclassed, their technology insufficient, and their forces weakening. Yet despite this, the Taxari refused to surrender. Their arrogance, deeply rooted in centuries of dominance, wouldn't allow them to admit defeat. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Maya, from the bridge of her flagship, watched as the Taxari fleets disintegrated before her eyes. The immense firepower they had unleashed was no match for the human resilience and the newfound power coursing through them. She could feel the ancient warriors within her, their strength and knowledge filling her with an overwhelming sense of purpose. The legacy of the war gods was no longer just a story from the past. It was her reality, and she would lead humanity back to their rightful place among the stars. The question, however, remained: would humanity use this power to protect the galaxy, or would they fall into the same darkness that had consumed their ancestors? The Taxari, shaken but not broken, regrouped. Their forces were scattered, their pride wounded, but they were not finished. As Maya stood victorious on the battlefield, she knew this was just the beginning. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Taxari would not simply retreat into the shadows. They would return with new strategies, new technologies, and new allies. And the war gods, humanity, would need to be ready. As Maya looked out at the stars, her thoughts turned inward. She had unlocked a power buried deep within her, but could she truly control it? The war gods had once ruled the stars, but that power had come with a price. Would humanity follow the same path, or would they prove to be something different? As the Taxari forces retreated, the answer was still unclear. But one thing was certain: humanity's wrath was swift, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Taxari, once certain of their dominance, were now desperate. Their first attempt to crush humanity had failed, and the war gods were growing stronger with each passing day. With their backs against the wall, the Caxari launched their final, most desperate counteroffensive, a massive invasion of Earth itself. They knew that if they didn't strike now, they would be completely overwhelmed by humanity's awakening. But this time they had something new, something far more dangerous, a weapon they hoped would neutralize a human threat once and for all, an advanced artificial intelligence capable of manipulating the minds of the war gods, severing their connection to the ancient powers hidden within them. The AI was designed to infiltrate human minds, disrupt their neural pathways, and prevent them from using their vast abilities. The AI was a technological marvel, and its capacity to manipulate was unmatched. As the Caxari launched their invasion, the AI began to infiltrate Earth's networks, its digital tendrils stretching across the planet, seeking to dominate the human mind. For a moment, it seemed as though the invaders had finally found a way to break the humans' resolve. The AI's influence spread like a dark cloud, clouding the thoughts of the awakened and bringing confusion and chaos. Those who had once been strong and clear-headed now found themselves losing control. But the Caxari had overlooked one crucial detail. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't just their raw power, it was their unity. Maya, now at the forefront of the awakened humans, felt the AI's influence creeping in, but she resisted. She wasn't alone in this battle. Slowly, other awakened humans began to realize what was happening, and they began to reach out to one another, mentally linking their minds in ways that even the Caxari hadn't anticipated. Instead of succumbing to the AI's influence, they shared their thoughts, their strength, and their resolve. As more and more humans joined this mental network, the AI's control began to weaken. The collective will of humanity, each mind acting as a tether to the others, proved stronger than the machine's manipulation. Maya and the other awakened leaders began to synchronize their thoughts, forging a unified front against the AI. It was as if the very essence of the war gods, these ancient beings who had once ruled the stars, was once again fully awakened, not just as individuals but as a unified force. In a series of coordinated mental strikes, the humans turned the AI's power back against the Caxari. What had been a tool to control them became a weapon in their hands. As they pushed back against the AI's grasp, they slowly began to tear down the digital walls it had erected. Every mind that joined the fight made the collective stronger, and in a final synchronized push, humanity shattered the AI's hold. The invasion faltered as the Caxari lost their control over their greatest weapon. But the victory wasn't complete. As the human warriors regrouped and the Caxari forces faltered, the alien invaders revealed one final secret, one last, devastating card they had been holding back. They were not alone in their fear of the war gods. The Caxari had made alliances with other ancient races, races that had once been subjugated by humanity's power. These forgotten enemies, still scarred by the ancient war, had quietly been building their own forces, preparing for this moment. And now, as the humans stood victorious, it became clear that the war was far from over. Maya felt a cold shiver run down her spine as she looked at the stars. The Caxari had not come alone. They had called upon the darkness of the past, and those who once feared humanity's power now stood ready to fight. The galaxy was on the verge of another massive conflict, and this time, humanity would face not just the Caxari, but an entire coalition of ancient enemies who had been waiting for their chance to strike. The war gods had returned, but would they be enough to save Earth, or would this new threat prove too great to overcome? The final battle was yet to come, and the fate of humanity and the galaxy was hanging in the balance. The war gods had been reborn, but now they would have to face the consequences of that ancient legacy. The Caxari had gambled everything on their final strike, and now so would humanity. As the war against the Caxari raged on, humanity's hope was beginning to burn brighter. The Caxari forces, once powerful and seemingly unstoppable, were faltering under the relentless counterattacks of the awakened humans. The war gods, their powers unlocked and their minds unified, were more than capable of repelling the invaders. But in the shadows, something far more dangerous was watching, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was during a crucial battle, when the Taxari were on the verge of complete collapse, that the true enemy revealed itself. From the darkness of space came a fleet unlike any humanity had ever seen. The ships were massive, sleek, and ancient, their design unlike any known species. They moved with terrifying precision, far beyond anything even the most advanced Zaxxari vessels could match. This new threat, the Vraks, had remained hidden for eons, observing the rise of humanity from a distance, biding their time. They were an ancient civilization, much older and more powerful than even the Zaxxari, and they saw in humanity's resurgence something that threatened their very existence. The Vraks had long ruled the galaxy from the shadows, manipulating events and orchestrating conflicts to maintain their dominance. It was they who had quietly pushed the Zaxxari into conflict with humanity, knowing that a weakened humanity would be easier to control or destroy. But now, seeing the war gods awake and growing stronger, the Vraks realized that humanity was not just a threat. They were the greatest threat to their long-standing reign. Humanity's power was something they could not allow to rise, so they decided to strike before the war gods could fully realize their potential. The Vraks were a terrifying force, their technology so advanced it seemed almost magical. Ships capable of destroying entire planets in a single strike. Weapons that could tear through space itself. Their fleets descended upon Earth with a force that made even the Zaxxari look like a minor nuisance in comparison. The skies burned as their ships unleashed devastating firepower, and their weapons shattered the very fabric of space-time, ripping apart anything in their path. The Vraks were determined to crush humanity before they could grow into a true power. Maya and the other leaders of the awakened humans realized, with growing horror, that this new enemy was unlike anything they had ever faced. The Vraks were not just powerful, they were ancient, calculating, and relentless. They had manipulated events for centuries, and now they were ready to unleash their full might. The Zaxxari, despite their previous failures, were now just a distraction. The real war had only just begun. In the face of this overwhelming force, Maya gathered her allies, those humans who had once been mere survivors, but now stood as the living embodiment of humanity's ancient power. They had faced impossible odds before, but this was a threat unlike any other. The war gods were no longer just legends. They were real, and they would stand together to protect their home. Maya knew that this battle would determine not just the future of Earth, but the future of the entire galaxy. The first clashes between humanity and the Vraks were nothing short of catastrophic. The Vraks unleashed their most devastating weapons, raining down destruction upon Earth's cities, targeting anything and anyone in their path. But the awakened humans, powered by the knowledge and strength of their ancient ancestors, fought back with a ferocity that stunned the Vraks. Human warships, now more advanced than ever before, clashed against the Vraks' fleet in a battle that stretched across the skies and into the far reaches of space. The Vraks had the power to destroy entire worlds, but the humans had something the Vraks could never comprehend: unity, purpose, and the unyielding will to survive. Maya led the charge, her mind connected to the others in a web of thoughts and strategies. The war gods might be facing their greatest challenge yet, but they were not ready to bow to any enemy. The Vraks had underestimated humanity. They had thought their manipulation of the Zaxxari would be enough to weaken Earth, but they had failed to see the strength that lay in the hearts of the awakened humans. Now, the battle for survival had become a battle for supremacy. Humanity would either rise and reclaim its place among the stars, or it would fall, crushed beneath the might of the Vraks. As the war raged on, one thing became clear: the true test had just begun. The Vraks were powerful, but the war gods had just begun to unlock their full potential. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was no longer just a forgotten race. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and the Vraks would soon regret underestimating them. The final battle had arrived, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Earth, once a quiet world at the edge of the galaxy, had become the battleground for supremacy, where the might of humanity would clash against the ancient power of the Vraks. The Vraks, once the hidden rulers of the galaxy, had unleashed their full force, determined to destroy humanity before the war gods could fully rise. In the skies above, fleets of human warships engaged the Vraks armada in an epic battle that seemed to shake the very heavens. Explosions lit the atmosphere as ships of every size collided, the air vibrating with the fury of ancient weapons and the roar of relentless determination. On the ground, Maya, now a symbol of humanity's strength, stood at the forefront of the final line of defense. Her eyes locked with the supreme commander of the Vraks, a figure whose power seemed to radiate from every inch of his being. The commander was a towering presence, an embodiment of the Vraks' centuries of power and manipulation. But Maya was no longer the same person who had first discovered her dormant powers. She had become something more, something ancient, something unstoppable. As she stepped forward, the ground beneath her feet seemed to hum with the power of her ancestors, a force that had been waiting, dormant for so long, now awake and burning within her. The two combatants faced off in a battle that would determine the galaxy's future. Maya's mind, linked to the other awakened humans, pulsed with unity. She wasn't alone. The power of the war gods surged through her, and in that moment, it felt as if the entire human race was standing behind her. With every strike, every maneuver, the battle felt as though it was unfolding across centuries, as if the very fabric of time and space were bending to their will. She called upon the forgotten powers of her people, powers that allowed her to manipulate reality itself, shifting the battlefield, warping time, and bending space to her will. Her movements were a blow of pure energy and ancient strength, and with each passing moment, the Vraks commander seemed to falter, his confidence waning as he realized that he was not facing a mere human, but a being who was the living embodiment of humanity's long-forgotten potential. Above, the skies were alive with the clash of fleets, humanity's forces now fully awakened to their true strength. The war gods, each tapping into the deep well of power within them, moved as one. Their unity was their greatest weapon. Ships moved in perfect synchronization, their weapons firing in harmony, creating a wall of fire that tore through the Vraks' forces. It was as if the entire galaxy had aligned itself with humanity's will, and the Vraks was simply outmatched. Their ships, once invincible, now fell one by one to the awakened might of the humans. The tide of battle shifted with breathtaking speed. Maya, her strength now overwhelming, pressed forward, her blows sending shockwaves that echoed through the very air. The Vraks commander, realizing that his forces were being torn apart above and below, began to retreat, but it was too late. In a final devastating move, Maya unleashed the full extent of the war god's powers, bending reality to her will, trapping the Vraks commander in a field of suspended time. The moment hung in the air, frozen in place, as Maya delivered the final blow. The supreme commander, once so certain of his victory, collapsed, his forces shattered, his fleet in ruins. As the dust settled, the scale of the victory became clear. The Vraks, defeated and broken, retreated into the depths of space, leaving Earth standing as the last great power in the galaxy. Humanity had won. The war gods, long thought to be legends, were no longer just stories whispered in the dark corners of the universe. They were real, and they had proven their power. The galaxy would never forget them again. With the Vraks' retreat, the war gods turned their gaze toward the future. Maya and her fellow awakened leaders knew that their battle was not just for Earth, it was for the entire galaxy. Humanity had risen from the ashes of ancient power, and now, as protectors of the stars, they vowed to never let the darkness return. Earth would be the shining beacon of hope, the last bastion of resistance against any who would threaten the peace of the galaxy. The war gods were awake, and they would not return to sleep. They had a new purpose now, one that stretched across the stars, ensuring that humanity would always stand as a force of nature, never to be forgotten again. The battle for the galaxy had been won, and humanity's story, only just beginning, would echo through the cosmos for eternity.